So thank you again for joining, and I'm going to get started. So a little on ITS. We're an advisory services and managed services company based in the Midwest, but with a national footprint that really focuses on doing a few things well. And we focus on doing unified or systems management. We focus on doing risk management. We focus on helping with the automation of IT, and then doing all that through advisory services and managed services. And there's a lot that falls under that umbrella, but that's what we do. We have some great partners that we do it with, and a lot of great customers that we help. So that's our company. We want to make this less of an advertisement and more of a knowledge transfer of what we're seeing in the industry and some of the trends that we're seeing to you. And so that's where we're going to go next. So look, a lot of what we're going to be talking about today are going to be things you already know. So I don't want you to think, I don't want it to come off as if we're telling you something new that you don't know anything about. I do want to give you a different approach, though, and maybe give you some of our thinking that might challenge the approach you're taking today. So some of the initial things that we talk about may not necessarily be really high level, or not high level, they may not be new ideas, but they're going to just be ideas that we're all dealing with. And then again, we'll be getting into some of the new thinking later in the presentation. The first thing I want to talk about is, hey, the demands on IT right now are absolutely stressing the system. And we're going to talk a lot about the demands of users, because that's where we focus. But you look at the generational changes happening right now, the number of baby boomers who are falling out of the business world into retirement, and that's a positive thing. And the amount of millennials coming into the workforce every day is extraordinary. And this is stressing the system. In addition to that, we've got a problem where in the past we told ourselves, and some of us, and I may be one of those people as a service provider, we told ourselves and promised ourselves that this thing would get simpler. And if we worked really hard and did a better job in IT, the whole thing would get simpler. And the reality is that dream is dead. We are cascading towards a more complex, more difficult IT world than we've ever imagined we would have. Now, the rewards are also much better, and the ability to be transformative in business and accomplish things that we thought impossible even a few years ago are there. But the reality is the complexity and difficulty around being an IT manager or working in IT is only increasing. And the old ways we solved that problem don't work anymore, meaning make it better, faster, doesn't work anymore. We like to say speeds and feeds. If you had a problem back in the 90s and especially in the 2000s, the answer was increase the speed of the server, increase the speed of the network, get better software. But we're cascading towards a situation where better software, better feeds and speeds won't solve some of the most critical problems that we have. And that leads us to the fact that we have critical problems, and the IT management is more critical than it's ever been. Let me talk just for a minute about what is causing this. Look, I think everybody on this call has either played Grand Theft Auto or Minecraft, or had a child or a grandchild or a sibling that's played one of these games. And while it's probably a guilty pleasure most of us shouldn't admit, I will openly admit that I played Grand Theft Auto, and I've played Minecraft with my kids. And the open world idea has changed not just gaming, but it's shined a light on the change in our culture that we maybe don't always think about. And after this talk, you might look back on it and think, Wade talked a lot about generations, and maybe I emphasize it too much, but I really do believe it helps us frame up what we're dealing with in IT. So, for example, you look at the generation, the greatest generation who came back from World War II, and they saw extreme change there as well. They saw the world. They saw a change in the world. They saw a change. I think one of the most extreme changes humans have ever experienced, which is the nuclear revolution and the nuclear warfare, the beginnings of it at the end of World War II. And when they came back from that war, the only thing they wanted to do was settle down and have everything be stable. And that led us into about 40 or 50 years of just in general, whether it be cultural or business or anything, things stabled out. And there was change, obviously. You look at the 60s and things of that nature. In the 80s, you'd say, wait, there's plenty of change. But there was a philosophy of, don't change. We want things to stay the same. Unfortunately, the bulk of the greatest generation is gone now, and my grandparents and your grandparents are no longer with us. And the baby boomers led us into some change, but the Generation X and millennials and this open world concept are leading us into a world of more rapid change and open world than we could have ever imagined. You think about books like Ready Player One, you think about Minecraft, and you think about how the world is changing. This idea of open world is now starting to affect the way our digital natives demand customized IT experience from us. And this is the next slide that I'm on. And Troy's going to talk a little bit about wanting to work anywhere, and I'll leave that for him. But I want to close up my portion of this talk on this thought. I remember when I first played. I played Grand Theft Auto for the first time. This was quite a few years ago. If you've never played the game, it's an open world. It's amazing. And again, I'm sure you've either seen it played or heard about it. But I was at my brother-in-law's house, and he was playing the game. And I'm like, what is this you're playing? And he goes, oh, it's this game, so on and so forth. And he said, well, you want to try it? I'm like, absolutely. I sat there for the next 5 hours, and I didn't stop playing the game. I don't even think I got up to go use the restroom. And it was like being set free as far as that game goes. And that philosophy is transitioning over to IT now. And while IT was able to avoid this for a long time, we're now in this world where our users are demanding a lot more from us. And the weird thing about it, and this is where Minecraft comes in, Minecraft has proven, especially with the millennials, that they are willing to accept a lesser technology if it opens up more options. Meaning, if you ever played Minecraft, it's not that hot of a technology. It was built in Java. The graphics are questionable at best. But the generation of millennials and Zs who are playing it still, they accept all that because of the options it gives them. And the same thing is happening with our digital natives, our users out there. They're accepting subpar technology that we don't provide them, because it gives them more openness than what we are providing for them. And so that transitions us over to their philosophy of where they want to work and how, and I'm going to transition to Troy just for a second to talk about that.
Yeah, thanks for having me on today, Wade. I will take all my dead dreams and put those in a box for a minute.
Your dreams are dead, Troy.
As you were talking, I thought about a couple of things. If you're wondering why this type of thing in Minecraft would be relevant to enterprise IT, don't forget, I think Microsoft paid $2 billion for the company that makes Minecraft. There's a wealth of information about how people are going to use and interact with technology in the next workforce that's entering the enterprise. And Microsoft's going to have a lot of that data because they bought that platform. I think the best way I can relate this to our audience is I remember reading Choose Your Own Adventure books and the freedom that empowered me with. That's really what your digital native or your productive user or your information worker of today needs. They have expectations, and we have to respond to these expectations. It's no longer optional to provide them part of what they want or tell them no. We have to engage every employee that we bring into our organization, because if you want to hire the best people, you're going to have to make some hard choices in your organization to be able to give them what they want, which is they want to work anywhere, anytime, right? And they don't want to have to ask IT for permission to use certain apps. And they don't want to have to make compromises to use a work device versus a personal device. And I've actually seen companies try to hire either a Generation Z or a millennial, and if you don't bring them the right experience from the start, you can actually lose that person in the hiring process, right? Nobody that's 22 years old is going to want to come into an office on the weekend and sit down at a workstation to have to use their email there, or even VPN in, right? Some of those things just aren't acceptable anymore. That lets me think a little bit about where things used to be, right? And I'm Gen X, so I came out of this environment where IT ruled with the quote-unquote iron fist. And what we're seeing today is users are already going around IT. They're not asking for permission. There are applications popping up in your environments that you don't know about. I think of a story I heard from a couple of Microsoft folks one time where they had a list of 100 customers, and they called them all and said, hey, what would you think about taking your AWS workload and moving it over to Azure? And they said almost everyone they talked to said, we don't use Azure. And they said, well, actually you do. We have a list. 99 out of 100 of those customers had at least $1 of Azure consumption in their organization, and the CIOs had no idea. That's just one example of how things can sneak into your enterprise and you don't know about it. So I think really what you need to focus on here is not trying to resist this trend, but embracing it and seeing how you can get a win. And that really comes down to something called NPS, or Net Promoter Score. If you don't think this is important, let me tell you why. I know that your CIO cares about Net Promoter Score because I know he's going to a Gartner symposium and Gartner's telling him it's important. And I know that when he's in a boardroom, his peers are telling him that Net Promoter Score is the most important thing that we need to talk about. And it really comes down to, yeah, uptime is important, costs are important, managing risk is important, but those aren't the things that are being discussed in the boardroom. They're talking about how to best enable productive users so they can accomplish what they need to do in the organization. And the next part of that is these productive users that we all have to accept and embrace, if you buy into my premise here, they really are the greatest risk to your organization. And I know this for a couple of reasons. One, professionals out there don't attack systems, they attack people. And people have devices, and those devices have a number of apps, which is growing exponentially by day, and the amount of data that they have on those devices is growing exponentially by day. And then, you know, the user is not in your data center. The user is out there in the world, you know, living in a world of risk, and there's a mountain of evidence to support the fact that your next compromise is going to come from the endpoint.
Yeah, you know, if you look at some of the things that we're being told by Gartner and others, and if you look at just the world we live in, where the media that we watch and the compromises that happen, the end user is the most vulnerable portion of that equation. And the challenge there is as soon as they gain access to that end user, whether it's through manipulation or whatever it is, the very next thing they're going to attack is whatever is they're holding in their hand, which is their mobile device. And we don't need to tell you guys this, you know this. So again, some of this is repetitive to things you already know, but that is the very first thing they're going to be going after, and that's the challenge.
So, you know, I guess to kind of state this in a more concise way, it's getting really hard to do this job, right? Convenience and security go in opposite directions. We've seen this over a long time in the different organizations that we work with. Why is this a focus now? Because your people can feel this. It's very visceral to your end users. When you have to tell them no, or you have to put them in a box, or you have to limit their choice or the way that they want to work, that's something that's very visible to them that they can really feel, and it impacts the way that they work and the value that you get out of that most important resource, which is your people.
So as you transition, because we know most of you buy off of this idea that this change is happening, and many of you have been talking about it for maybe longer than we have. We're learning some of these best ideas from our customers and others, so this is not new to us. But as you do this, and as you think about, all right, what is the transition we're going through? We went from devices to apps. And now, you know, if you believe what Gartner says, and I trust a lot of what they say, we're going from the post-app era, we're going into the data era. And arguably, we've always been there, but right now the focus is on apps. But we're moving into this post-app era, and as we move in there, we're going to see a explosion of data, an explosion of devices. This is not a matter of will you be working on your phone or your desktop or laptop. This is a matter of, are you going to be working on your wall or on your car? Are you going to be working from your backpack? I mean, we're seeing the change and the explosion of devices and the explosion of vectors and places where people can work, and it's happening so fast. And I think there's things that we can't even imagine. And this gets us to the next point. You know, the stakes are high, and in security, we talk a lot about attack vectors. But ITS is more than just a risk company. We're also a support company, and we help IT departments do a better job of supporting their users and the devices that they use, things of that nature. And I really believe it's not just about attack vectors; it's also about support vectors. What are you supporting next? What are you going to be forced to help the end users do? And then it's about data vectors. You talk about big data, and that's not necessarily something that ITS does. We're not a big data company, but we deal with big data every day because it's just growing. And the points at which the data can leak when you have these end users using it everywhere, it's extreme. And on one hand, we're telling you that generations are changing and they're going to demand more from you. And by the way, you have to give it to them. On the other hand, I'm telling you that you got to balance this with how you're going to stay protected, because these vectors are changing, and they're not just changing. I'm sorry, I should say they are increasing, and they're increasing at an exponential rate. And I joke around. I just made a statement. You'll be working on your wall, but that really is the future. I mean, we're not talking about working on your TV or your watch. We're talking about working on your wall, working on your table. I mean, this is only years away. We're so close to having an environment where you work in your environment, not on a device, and you have to be preparing for that transformation. And as we get there, and as we try to figure this out, one of the biggest problems is there's too much for us to do. We're the first group of generations, and I say group of generations because I really think it started with the baby boomers, and X and millennials are experiencing more than anybody. But we're the first generations in the history of man that have too many good things happening to them at one time. Let me give you an example. On any given weekend, you don't have to figure out what you're going to do for fun. You have to choose between what are all the fun things you could be doing, whether it is watching your favorite TV show on Netflix, or it's going to a ball game, or hanging out with your friends, or going to some church or local organization that you're a part of. There are so many things that you can be doing that are fun or interesting to you. And work is no different. When we start talking about this explosion, there are so many things that IT could be managing every day. And at this point, it's a matter of picking what are the right things. And we'll talk a little more about that when we get into the doctrines.
Yeah, we think about this evolution that we're in, or maybe even a revolution, just based on how fast the technology is moving. Tool-centric thinking, it's a tough place to be.
That's the old way. And that's the old way we did it.
Yep, that's the old way. And I can remember being a consultant and a lot of times parachuting into an organization to help make the tools work. And that had a great return, right? The tools did work, and they did accomplish things. But ultimately, the teams that we worked with fell out of orbit on that because either the tool let them down, the organization didn't adapt to new inputs or changing trends. A good example here is Windows 10 right now, and the change in the patching methodology that Microsoft introduced with Windows 10, but then last month retroactively applied to both Windows 7 and 8.1. It increases the demands on the teams who are working for patch compliance. It changes the way they have to work, and it adds a number of complexities that almost no organization has planned for. And if you do know about this, it's still hard for you, right? That's something I talk about with organizations every day is we didn't know and we got to figure out how to address this, or we did know and we're still trying to figure out how to address this, and we help both types of organizations.
So I'm just going to comment there. No matter what tool you're using, you're constantly going through this. How do we figure this out with a tool? It's a repetitive cycle.
Yeah, and I think when we look at where we are today, consulting really led us here. Our luxury in the market is our exposure to a number of different customers, and the breadth of industries and sectors or verticals or whatever you want to call it that we have exposure to. Our customers learn from us, but we also learn from them, right? And I used to tell my customers this, that I get in on Monday and do a kickoff meeting for a consulting engagement and say, guess what, guys? I get smarter every week. I learn something new, and you're going to get the benefit of that. We have to continue to learn and adapt, and that's a mindset that your IT organization has to adopt. Is we don't know it all. We don't even know a small segment of it today. We have to engage ourselves in being a learning and adapting organization.
But it's fair to say, Troy, that the best organizations have adopted a new mindset. So the people who are tackling these really difficult problems we just laid out to you, they have adopted a new mindset. Now, not everybody's being successful to the level they want to be. Very few are, in fact. But most of the people who are having success have adopted a new mindset. And like Troy was saying, we're about to share with you what you came to the PowerPoint, you came to the webinar for, and that's what our thinking is around this. But we just want to make sure we stop for a second and recognize the fact that just like Gartner's thinking, or anybody else, Forrester, or whoever you want to pick on, just like their thinking isn't 100% driven from them, a lot of it they get from their customers just by talking to them. Our thinking comes from both talking to you and also talking to some of the best companies out there who've done this successfully. And while we've helped them, we've pulled as much from them as they pulled from us. And that's the partnership that comes a part of this. And then when you solicit the help of an ITS, a company like ITS from an advisory services standpoint, that's some of the value that we bring. So this is where the real meat is. We're going to get into what are the different things that the organizations do to break free of these mundane, everyday problems, and how do they, what doctrines have we identified? And we call them doctrines to be provocative. But what are the 7 doctrines or key doctrines that we found that make the best companies run, and how do they tackle these big problems in IT? So the very first doctrine is that you can't do everything at best practice level. And I know this sounds counterintuitive, and a few of you might just drop off the webinar just seeing this slide, but the reality is we have moved past the point that we thought we were going to get to, where everything in IT would just get fixed and it would just work, and if we just implemented all this great technology, it'd be just wonderful. But the world and the demands that the end users are putting on us are creating a situation where we just can't keep up with all those demands. It's not realistic. You don't have enough income in your business to do it. It's just not going to happen. So you have to prioritize the outcomes that you want. So for example, obviously everybody has to have email. If email is a priority, then that's got to go to the top of the stack. Now, I know a lot of you are like, of course email has to be a priority, but I'm just starting at the most fundamental. Moving from there are some things that you think are a priority that may not be, and you have to let drop off in order to focus the IT department in the right areas. And this is the number one thing that we see the best organizations do. They know that they can't do everything, and they're going to have high, medium, and low priorities. And that high priority stuff, man, that gets the real focus. And that leads us to the second best practice, and that is people, people, people. And this is an easy one to talk about. It's an easy doctrine to identify. But people and team or colleagues, however I should approach you, we all make huge mistakes on this point. Even ITS, even the best-in-class companies make mistakes in this, and they don't focus on their people. But if you don't have the right mission-ready teams, if you don't take the right approach to this, you cannot succeed in IT. It doesn't matter how many tools you buy. It doesn't matter how many other things you try to accomplish inside of IT. You have to have the right people. And that leads us to probably the bigger problem in the world right now, and that is we have a very tight IT market right now as far as talent goes. There isn't enough talent, and there is a fight right now for the best talent. So your talent, as you know, is coming and going. It's difficult to keep. It's difficult to get the talent. And you have to figure out who are the right players in the right team to accomplish those priorities we talked about in the first doctrine. And I just want to put a plug for ITS. Well, you've got to figure out this doctrine. The reality is that ITS has multiple vectors that we can help. Obviously, there's advisory services. There's obviously managed services where we can just take over certain parts of your business. We'll talk about that later. But the thing that I think a lot of people miss on this particular slide is we can help from a training and support perspective. There's a lot of times where we have customers who just say, you know what, we can't have your advisory services come in and do 30 weeks of consulting. That doesn't make sense. And we can't do managed services right now, maybe in the future. But we still need to have the right team and a team that's enabled. Again, people, people, people. Well, training support is still an option. And you need to be looking at organizations like ITS. How can they train and support your people?
So Wade, you said something a minute ago that affected my thinking, so I'm going to go off script here a little bit. When I used to walk into an organization during my consulting career, it was very typical to talk to the networking team and then talk to the security team and then bring in the storage team and then maybe bring in the compliance team. maybe then the user or service desk team. And there were a number of different teams that all had a stake in a tool change or something that was going into the environment. And when I walk in now to a customer that's at some level of optimization but still needs some help, right? What I see is really what I would call a global architecture team, right? It's a cross-functional team where they bring together representation from these areas. And what you said that kind of caused me to think about that is, it is really hard to hold on to the best talent. And it is really hard to identify the right talent for the right project. But when you start mixing those teams and going across some of those silos, what you'll find is you may have many of the right people in your organization that just need some wisdom to get them pointed in the right direction. And you bring together your best storage guy, your best networking person. You bring together somebody from compliance, and maybe she's got a great handle on the issues that are facing you from regulatory compliance. And when those teams start working together to select the right technologies, to mature the right technologies, and to bring in the right organizations to help them optimize those technologies, that's where you really are able to make good progress in a short amount of time.
It's interesting, Troy, you say that because we've had this philosophy in IT that we need to have we have to have like-minded people, like-minded teams, and that's how we're going to have success. And IT hasn't matured as quickly as the business world has. And you look at the business world and you look at cross-functional teams and the success that is happening in a lot of other departments and a lot of other areas. And development is starting to see this as well. You look at some of the things that are happening with Scrum and the way they're doing cross-functional teams in Scrum, and in the development world, that is. And we're seeing the value of having those cross-functional teams. So that's an easy, simple thing you can change very, very quickly when we talk about breaking down the silos and really making sure that we're connecting these teams.
Yep, yeah, and as I get into talking about process here, it just brings me back to a point you made earlier about the new generations. The millennials I manage don't want to work with people that look and think and act and operate like them. They want some diversity of thought and those things in their teams. And so it's all kind of coming together, right? As we look at how process works, I'm fond of saying that IT makes business decisions now, right? And it really comes down to this, and I think this is the sort of the golden nugget in this part of the presentation. IT for years has either by force or will been focused on making it easy for the business to consume IT and making it easy for their end users. And because of all the challenges that you talked about today, and the explosion of data and the explosion of risk and the multiple changing vectors, it's time for IT to focus on optimizing it for ourselves so that we can scale to the next IT evolution. And something that I think is important to kind of support that is we got to be honest about where we're at today, right? Where our tools, and something that we see really effective teams do is instead of partially adopting a tool, so for example, you buy a security suite, maybe you only use one or two of the functions. Wade, that's something that frustrates me. I'm sure it frustrates you.
It frustrates me like crazy. The tool explosion that came out of the 2000s at some level was appropriate because there were a lot of problems to solve. But we've gone so far beyond the need for all the tools that we have. And some of the most mature companies I get a chance to work with, they always stop every couple of years and they say, for a certain amount of time, where it's 6 months or 12 or 18 months, no more new tools. We're going to use the tools that we have. We're going to identify what's broken and what's working, what's not working. And then from there, we're going to identify what is the appropriate direction to go as far as tools go. And what happens is they find so much more value in their existing tools that they weren't getting out of them. And they also find out that they don't need to spend as much as they were on tools. Now, there are times when a new tool is 100% appropriate, but too often we get sucked into as IT professionals because we just love the new technology, whether it's hardware or software. We love the new tool. And that is an area that we just have got to stop investing in, and we've got to start looking at how do we optimize the tools we have. And I know you have some experience in this, Troy. You've seen it firsthand.
Yeah, I think you would probably call that new tool fatigue, right? We've got to stop buying things to solve our problems and get more value out of the things that we've already invested in. And there's an interesting trend I've seen in some very mature companies, and this is being driven by companies I think that have a lot of regulatory pressure on them. They have their own internal advisory group, and that could be called tools, methods, and processes, or tools advisory, something like that. But what it really is it's a procurement blocker. And this means if you don't have this in your organization today, you may soon, but when you want to buy a new tool to do something that you need to get done, you're probably going to have to go to somebody inside of your IT organization that's going to be maintaining a complete inventory of the tools, assessing the ROI that you're getting out of those tools, and they're going to tell you no a few times before they say yes to buying something new.
Yeah, and we're spending a lot of time on this, but this is the final thought, and we'll move to the next slide. One of the most successful organizations I've seen out there, a very large pharmaceutical we've worked with, when they would buy a new tool that would cost them multiple millions of dollars, they would put one or two $100,000 resources, which is a very small percentage of the overall cost, on that tool full time to suck out every single bit of value. And they would get it, by the way, and it was at a very small investment. But I'll also work with large, not as mature organizations that will buy a tool, have the consultants install it, and maybe it was us, maybe it wasn't, get a very small percentage of the value out of it, and then never go back to it again. And that's a very low maturity. And it's not about whether you hire a person internally or you use advisory services or consulting to do it or even managed services. It's about ensuring that as you put the tool in, you're planning for the future and you're making sure you're getting the right value out of it.
Yeah, so let's assume we fix all of those things, right?
Yeah.
We adopt and practice the doctrines, and we fix a lot of our process around that. We've got these tools, and we're trying to get a lot of value out of them, but how do you really make that work? And there are a number of examples of this I could talk about, but let me just kind of boil it down to this. We've got to automate our internal processes. We have to follow some doctrine, whether that's MIS principles or Scrum or Kaizen or whatever you want to adopt and practice in your organization. But we've got to pick off the things that we can automate. A good example of this would be is most everybody on this webinar today probably has password reset self-service for their end users, right? That's an easy thing to solve. We put a tool up in the cloud, we give it some kind of security protocol, and we let end users reset their passwords when they're working at Starbucks or they're in a different time zone and the help desk is closed or whatever that is. But we've got to take it beyond that. Your organization, if it has password self-service reset, probably doesn't have telemetry about how many of those logins are anomalous, or do we have a risk in one territory versus another, or is a certain user population presenting more risk to the organization? And we've all got a service catalog today. We've all got some things built that can help us automate and optimize these processes. But think about this. If you can't hire a new employee today and have them walk into a Microsoft store in a mall somewhere, buy a Surface Pro 4, and hit a couple of buttons and get themselves productive that day, then you've got more work to do here.
Yeah, I mean, just think about how unproductive those users are for a couple of days. And that's a very extreme example, but even if they can't walk into the storage room inside your own department or your division or headquarters or wherever and grab the same thing and be that way, you're wasting a lot of time and money. So the final doctrine is about having an ongoing process to mature your solutions. And we've already hinted at this, and I've already kind of got on my soapbox, but let me just do it for a little bit longer, because we've hinted at the different eras of IT, and I've talked about the 90s and the 2000s, but if you look at the different eras of IT, most people will tell you we're going to the fourth era of IT. First era being heavy metal, big mainframes, IBM days. The second era being the PC revolution, the 80s. The third era being the internet revolution, kind of what we just are coming out of. And now we're going to this fourth era of IT. And the reality is this thinking is a little bit of, we're thinking still second and third era IT, and our thinking is broken because we're looking at tools and hardware as single point in time solutions, and we don't think about what is the long-term process. And if we look at other sides of our long-term process, or things that we're going to do with, I should say, if you look at other sides of our business, whether you're sitting in IT and you've got a sales department or you've got a finance department, those other departments put in really large tools and they spend a lot of money, but they're looking at a 10 or 20 year return on that, And this is what's going to run their business for a long time. Whereas IT, we're solving point-in-time problems, and we really have to expand our thinking on that. And so those are the 7 doctrines. Now, the real question is, how do you leverage our insights? How do you leverage ITS to make sure that you are getting the most value out of IT and you're solving these critical problems we've already talked about? So this is the advertisement side of the webinar, and I hope you'll stick with us for just one more minute because we're nearly done. But the first thing that you can leverage us for is what Troy already talked about. It's a happy coincidence that we focused on security and we focused on users. And I'd like to tell you we're really smart and we planned on that, but the reality is that it kind of happened by accident. And we've been sitting in this world where we're helping you manage your users, we're helping you be protected, and those two things are coming together faster and are becoming a bigger and more important deal than ever. And this is where ITS can help. We have advisory services and we have thinking around this that we think could help you solve both these problems at the same time. Now, you'll never be fully protected and fully productive at the same time. It's just not possible. But we can help you get to both sides of the scale faster and further on both sides than what we think you could do on your own or most other organizations by using our consulting services.
Yeah, I'd love to tell everyone that it's our holistic thinking and our measured approach and a bunch of other smart words, but you're right, Wade. We got a little bit lucky. I think it's because we stayed focused on the user, right? We didn't dive into storage or data center modernization or any of those things. It was really hard to not follow that money in the market, but we're at the right time in the right place with this. We have a very strong end user focus, and ultimately, productive users are what generate revenue and drive businesses forward. Right?
For our customer, not for us.
Yeah, exactly.
The more productive and more protected your end user are, the more they can generate for you as thought leaders and knowledge workers in your business.
Yep. Yeah, and I have a story I like to tell a lot, or something I may do in a customer meeting is I'll actually sit down and grab somebody's laptop and point at it and say, laptop, make them money, right? Because the idea there is the device and everything with IT focusing on the device doesn't drive your business forward. So what are we going to do there, right? Well, in our advisory, we'll deploy a pod of pretty smart people with a lot of wisdom. They've got the experience to back it up to help you understand what do you need to do? How do you adopt these doctrines? And what does that mean in your IT organization, in your business? And really from there, the decision comes down to who's going to own the outcome, right? You want us to help you mature, and then you own the outcomes and have to operate your business going forward and understand how to adapt to all this change? Or do you want to engage with us in a managed service and we'll own the outcome for you? Our value is a multi-tenancy of knowledge. I know as everything moves to the cloud, there's a lot of talk about the gains that you can leverage there. But most of those gains are for the service providers, right? Being able to put you in a multi-tenant architecture and provide you software as a service, that's really an advantage for the provider. And so when it comes to an organization like ours, where we're a learning and a teaching company, that multi-tenancy of knowledge is something that you can get from us. And ultimately, what we want to do is help you have your IT pros focus on your why, not ours.
Yeah, and Troy's so right. We're here to help you, whether you want to have advisory and professional services, which includes support and training. We can do that, and we're happy to do that. If you've reached the maturity level, and it is considered the highest level of maturity when you do go after managed services, and you say, look, there are certain parts of our business, whether it's managing, the example that you use over and over again is managing patch management. You shouldn't be doing that. That's not your role in the business. If you outsource that to the portion of your business, then that allows you to go focus in helping your end customers accomplish your business's why, as Troy said earlier, and help you drive more revenue or more whatever is important to you and your company. And that's something that we don't know anything about. We don't understand your business. You do. Let us take away those mundane things from you, or at least point you in the right direction with our advisory services and how to get rid of them. And then you can go help your customers accomplish more. So as I wrap up, and this is the final slide before we do the closeout slide. It's just a thank you slide. But I want to talk just for a second about the other things that ITS provides. So we have a lot of other insights that you can go download, and you can see some of our white papers, and you get the 7 doctrines and read through that. But I really want to leave you with a quick story, and I hope you stick around for it and don't drop off, because I think this is a story you can even reuse yourself. And as we enter into the fourth era of IT, I talked about that a little bit already, you're going to see a change in the approach to IT. We've already in the first, second, and third era, we picked off the easy things to do. For example, automating billing, automating accounting, automating HR, automating, mail with email, automating the calculator with Excel, automating the word processor with Word, and those are just examples. Automating connecting people with the internet. A lot of the easy to do things have already happened. But where this whole thing really comes home and it really makes a lot of sense is when you're able to do what Sam's Club just recently did. And I don't know if you're a Sam's Club customer. I'm a Sam's Club and Costco customer, and they're the best example I can give you of what's happening in the fourth era of IT. And if you have ever gone to a Sam's Club or Costco, the biggest problem is checking out. It's just a pain in the neck, and they don't invest a lot into the checkout process because that doesn't make them money. They invest a lot in the membership and having the right products, and then the checkout is something you have to tolerate. And that's not their value, getting you out there fast. And Sam's Club just recently recognized this, and they've developed a new solution. And this gets into the idea I said earlier, where the next things we accomplish in the fourth era of IT aren't going to be these simple automating of email and things of that nature. It's going to be very, very high level of things that we're not thinking of, but solutions that are going to revolutionize the way we do business. And Sam's Club just did it. They now have an app, and everybody has an app. But with Sam's Club app, when you go around the store, when you put anything into your cart, if you scan that item with the app, it will automatically charge you for that item. And then when you go to check out, you don't go to a checkout line. You just walk out, show the person at the exit your app and the fact that you paid and what's in your cart, and you walk out. And that makes a difference whether I want to go shop at Costco or Sam's Club. And arguably, I'd rather go to Costco. I like their store better. They have a better service, in my opinion. But I'm going to default to Sam's Club, just like I default to Starbucks because of their app and their way of helping me check out, just like I'm going to default to other people. And that's a small example of how the fourth era of IT is going to revolutionize the way we look at interactive technology and the digital transformation that's happening in IT. And I say this to say the next thing to you. As that happens, the fourth era of IT is not about what tools you can install or what hardware you can implement. We all know what it's about. It's about platforms, it's about consolidation, and it's about the last mile. How are you interacting with that customer or your customer, and how you're interacting with the technology that's in their hand? I can't tell you how to do the Walmart example or Sam's Club example, I can't tell you how to do that in your own company because you know your end customer, we don't. But we know how to help you do the equivalent of that for your customer. How do you make your customer more productive and more secure at the same time? We have the insights and the ability to do the same thing that Sam's Club did for me as a customer, for you, for your customer. You just got to give us an opportunity to do it. So that's my shameless plug for ITS. We'd love to continue the conversation in the future, but I'm Wade Wyant, and Troy, our Vice President of Systems Management, is the other person who's been doing the presentation. It's been great talking to you, and please contact us directly and download our white papers, and we look forward to talking to you in the future. Thank you, and have a wonderful day.